Howdy hackers, and welcome to another episode of FairLight TV. This time I now have the mic in front of me, which means that I hope the sound is a bit better than it has been for a few episodes. The camera is also reasonably new, so if this doesn't cut it, then there is something else I need to do, because I can't spend any more money on the gear for recording this anymore. So this time the idea is to talk about preservation. There will be C64 aspects and there will be Amiga aspects of this. So let's start by the two medias, disk and tape. Establishing the principle first, when you are preserving data from digital media, you can basically do it on three levels. DOS level, some sort of extended DOS level, and some sort of flux level, and I will dive into that. DOS level is when you read the actual kind of data that it sits there. It doesn't read anything else but what the DOS can read for you. That is valid both for tape and disk. Extended DOS is sort of only applicable to disk. That is reading a bit more than what's valid for DOS, but not going all the way down to the flux layer. If you are familiar with the Amiga format Warp, that was a format where you used sort of a technology to read beyond the actual DOS level, and that will capture most of the kind of the contemporary protection mechanisms available. On the C64 you would have G64, which is basically the same. It's a GCR encoding scheme image, so to speak. Flux is reading like the raw data stream on the very rawest level, and I'm not going to explain how Flux works, because I can't. I'm actually not able to, because I don't know. But let's sort of keep those three levels in mind when we go through to this. So first, tapes. All right, so C64 tapes. I hope you can see that, and I hope I don't have anything intervening between me and the microphone. Grandmaster Slam. That's one of the originals I have lying on my desk for no apparent reason. There was a complaint that the FairLight version had some sort of bug. Adrian, that one is yours. That was cracked by the alchemist, and if there is a bug, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. Okay, so adding to tapes, I have to show you the tape recorder. I always had this kind of +4, the 1531. It's a rather good one. It doesn't have most of the kind of issues that you had with the white original ones, where you need to adjust the little knob every now and then. The +4 had this kind of a connector, and the C64 does have kind of this board side plug-in. But there is this adapter, so this one works really nice. I've never had any issues with it, and if you talk to people about their experiences from C64 tape in the same context as I didn't have any problems with it, that's basically unheard of. Okay, so when you read tapes, and I should sit here waving with this tape so you know this is a tape, you can store in kind of DOS, which is what the kernel loads and saves, but basically nothing is like that. There is just this little boot file, because the DOS loading and DOS saving is horrendously slow. It's absolutely rock solid. It will work under any circumstances, but nobody uses that. It's just too slow. You would need like a 60-minute tape to load something which is a very small game. So you don't want that. So everybody stores in their own proprietary format, and that basically means that when you're reading stuff from the tape, you are sort of reading it from the flux layer. You are low level reading the tapes, and it's not DOS compatible. So I have a number of things in front of me that you can use for preserving tapes. Yeah, let's first start with this little bucket. A guy called Luigi da Fraia. Luigi, is that correct? Yeah, Luigi, Flavio Web. He creates a number of different tape adapters, and this is something called DC2N version 4 low cost. You plug in here on this side power, and you plug in here a micro USB, and you connect the tape adapter there. And this one then helps you read tapes. So you can use this to preserve tape. It's a very, very small and convenient little thing that can do a lot of things. Rowdy of FairLight did something which is sort of similar to this one. You connect it to USB to your PC, and then you control it from there. So you basically access the tape deck, and then the result ends up on the PC. So this is, again, DC2N version 4 low cost. So this one is DC2N version 5 low cost. It's also the board version 1.1. It says here on the back. So it has a micro SD slot here. It has like tape connector to the C64 board, but you can also connect a tape, the tape deck to here. So it can sit between the C64 and the tape deck if you want to use both functions, because this can both emulate a tape and it can record tapes, and it's fully self-sufficient. So you connect power, and then you can control it here, and you got a little boot menu here, and you can kind of read the tape off the tape deck just using this, and then you don't have any C64 connected. And when you have read it, you can forget that part, and you can use this to emulate a tape. You just select which tape the C64 sees using the menu system here. So yeah, very, very professional product. Works super nice, I think. I haven't used it, but looking at Luigi's seeing Luigi's YouTube videos, it looks really convenient. So mine, I guess mine is for sale because I don't think I will ever use it. The third way is this one. It's this one is an Ultimate 2 Plus. You can also use the Ultimate 64, you know, the board that sits in the original C64 case. You just replace the original motherboard with the Ultimate 64. If you go into the menu and press F5, there is a function called sample tape. And then you just go out in the normal sort of the Commodore environment, and then you just press play. And then the Ultimate 64 or this one samples the entire tape into a tap file. And I should have said that from start. The sort of Flux Level tape you get out of this is a tap file. I haven't heard of any sort of protection or any sort of loader system that doesn't work inside a tap file. So that's sort of a format that works for all tape C64 tapes. Should I recommend anything? It would be this one. I mean, if you run the real C64, this is the cartridge you should have, because this can do everything and anything. If you want to go like more simplified, I would suggest the Ultimate 64. Because then you have access to this. This is sort of sitting inside the machine, but you just don't need the physical unit outside. Press F5, enter the name of the file you want to sample, and then exit, and then just press play, and hey presto, you have a tap file on your SD card. So that's tapes. Am I not going to show you anything like any screen? It's just me sitting here talking. Yes, this is one of those episodes where I will be sitting here talking. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go into disks. C64 disks, and you want to kind of DOS copy them. That would be your own pirate copies, or I mean, your disk where you store your original work. Also here you can use the this one, the Ultimate 2 Plus, or one of the other Ultimates, or you can use the Ultimate 64. You just set up a 2-disk copy where one of the instances is a disk image rather than the physical disk drive. So you have your native C64, you have a connected disk drive, and then you just use any standard disk copy program, and the copy is a D64.5. So D64 is the format for just plain DOS copies. There is sort of an extended version of that's bigger than the original, where it has sort of error information afterwards. It's not compatible with like everything, so you really don't want that. You want to have D64s plain with only the data, no error information. So that's one way of doing it. I'm not saying it's convenient, but if you're just going to do like one image, then that's a quick and easy access from your Ultimate 64. The other thing would be let's look into the next one here. There is something called XUM1541 that is sort of a USB to serial IEC serial. So I have one of those here. It's the most common one is the Zoom floppy. This one is by Björn Hutmacher, Swedish guy. He makes this convenient little thing. What could that be like? It's the size of a golf ball, basically. So like 4 or 5 centimeters wide, and yeah, 4 or 5 centimeters square. I think this is an Arduino, and you connect your 1541 there via the serial interface, and then you have that one. And then you use sort of the same software as you use with the Zoom floppy. The best program for ripping just plain vanilla DOS disk would be D2D64. Janni, whom you might know as Sailor of Triad, did the absolute best copy program there is for this. It's super fast, and well, you need to sit there and fiddle in your shell to name it, but he has automated as much as you can out of the process, and it's rock solid. So I would strongly recommend D2D64. That's disk to D64 for you. And this is sort of the interface. Zoom floppy or one of the compatible interfaces, such as this one. Oh, I forgot one thing. So we wedge in this little thing. When you're using D2D64 by Janni, do use a 1571 if you have one. And if you don't have one, buy one. If you're preserving multiple disks using the Zoom floppy or any sort of compatible interface with the 1571, makes it so much easier, because the 1571 has an SQR. There is this additional mode that the interface can use, and it goes super fast. It's so much faster. Serial copying with the 1571 is faster than parallel copying on the native 64. So you should have 1571, just so you know. Okay, so C64 disks with some sort of extended DOS. That's when you want to rip things to G64. And there is a program called NibTools that you should use together with one of those Zoom floppy compatible interfaces. Again, a compatible C64 serial unit connected to the serial port here, and then connecting this one to the PC and running programs on the PC. But you're just not kind of ripping DOS, you are ripping it on the lower level. That's the best way of creating G64s without involving any kind of PC drive. That's the way you do that. And let's also talk a bit about Amiga Disks. So if you want to rip something to the PC from the Amiga, you can use basically the same strategies as you do on the 64. The format, ADF, Amiga Disk file, I presume. You just make like an X copy to an image, and then you can copy it over. There are, of course, dedicated programs for reading the disk to an ADF, and vice versa, taking an ADF and writing that to like a normal physical disk. But you can use the Amiga itself for that. There is also the opportunity of using warp, and that's not saying it's really fast, because that is sort of the equivalent of the G64. It's a format where you could sort of rip original disk and represent them inside an image file rather than having them on the physical disk. Warp, not all warp files are possible to write back to the Amiga, because it can read more than it can write. So sometimes the warp needs to be sort of manipulated before you can write it back. But these are ADF and warp. And I'm sorry, I don't know any of the program names. I'm sure if you're into Amiga, you can just Google ADF or rip Amiga Disks warp, and you will probably find something relevant to you, or possibly other videos describing this method in more details. But these are the two. And then I would like to show you one little thing more. So this one. This interface is called Cat Weasel. It's done by Individual Computer, so Jens Schoenfeld. This is a PCI bus, so this goes into the PC, and then you also have two slots for native SIDs. So if you wanted to play real 64 sounds using a real SID, this is the way you could do it. Rather than emulating, you would run it. I think this one would be hard SID compatible, so it would be there was an interface called hard SID, and I think this is what this is. This one is called MK4 Plus. It's the last revision Jens did. Not every computer would have a PCI bus, so you will probably need to find a reasonably old computer for this to actually work. But so what you can use this for is connect a PC disk drive, and then you could read it. You can use that one to also read Amiga disks and other like non-PC standard disks, because if you use your normal kind of disk drive interface in your PC that couldn't read Amiga disks, you would need something like this in between. Okay, so now we're into the Flux Level, and again, Flux Level is the same on all media. These are three interfaces I will show you now, and they are supporting basically any format, physical format of the disk. As long as you can connect it to the interface, and sort of that format is known to the interfaces, it can read them. It doesn't matter if it's 5 1/4, 3 1/2, 8-inch, or some other format. It doesn't matter if it's C64 GCR, or if it's MFM, or if it's from Spectra Video or Atari or a Commodore or whatever. It can read everything, because Flux Level is sort of agnostic to the implementation or the brand or the provider of the hardware that you use to originally write it. So let's go through it. This is Cryoflux. I shouldn't really rank which one is the better, because I haven't kind of played around with them enough. I just bought all of them. Yeah, that's my disease. I couldn't help that. So Cryoflux, recommended by a number of people doing preservation, so I'm sure this is a really good one. And I would say Cryoflux is also a rather cool name. A less cool name would be Supercard Pro. It's a good product. It's compact and really competently made. When I played with this, it was a few years ago, and it rips to sort of the Flux format, but then all the support tools for converting it down to G64 or D64, they were not really there. So I'm sure this has developed over the years, but before you buy this one, and if you want to use it for C64, I would recommend that you actually ensure that it currently works with that particular setup. Yeah, the producers of those two, they were constantly fighting in web forums over who has the better product. Yeah, I know which one I found to be the more arrogant in the forums. I haven't even opened this one. This is a Grease Weasel. More an open source one, so you don't need to buy the actual pre-assembled product. You can buy the components and the card, and you can build it yourself if you want to save a buck. If you know how to do that, which I don't, then that would be something. There is really active development around this, and there is a community around this. So as with many things, closed source and also closed design tends to kind of deteriorate over time when the driving force is sort of losing energy, or there aren't that many customers running in buying their products anymore. They move on to other projects. Whereas if you have a community, you can always kind of dive in and you can start helping out, and that tends to be a good basis for vivid development and active contributions from many things. So Grease Weasel, it comes in multiple form factors. This is the biggest one, I would imagine. I think this one was called like 7. I'm not really sure about that. But these were the 3 interfaces I had for ripping on Flux Level. So C64 5 1/4 disc. Well, it's a 5 1/4 disc. It's a double density one, and this particular one is used for the 64. But there are, of course, a number of other computers that use the same physical form factor, formatting the disk using their logical structure. I just wanted to point out a few things on this one. So this little notch here, I would say, on this side, that's the original one. So when you buy the disk, there is this notch already there. And if you tape it over using one of the supplied little stickers, it's becoming write protected. So that's the way you write protected those disks. But most of us were really young and we didn't really have any money. So using all our pocket money on disks, it was a total waste to have the single side 1541 only writing to one side of the disks. So what we did was buy one of those little cheap disk notchers that could do an elegant little notch here on this side. And suddenly you can flip the disk over, flip it into the disk drive, and then you can also use the back side. Anybody who had a 64 and a disk drive would know this, because that was the logical way to do it. And there was no kind of downside to this. The backside worked just as fine as the front side. So it's only now that we are preserving them that we could potentially run into an issue. Of course, if you're using the native machine, the C64, and using the serial devices for it, it's not really an issue. But there is an issue when you use the Flux interfaces for reading it, and using one of those native PC disk drives. One of those standard PC disk drive. This one is a Toshiba. I hope it's 1.2 megabytes. I'm not really sure because I haven't really used it. But so standard PC disk drive. That one can absolutely fine read the front side before flipping. The issue comes when we should read that side of the disk. And the reason for that is that disk drive has two read heads, so it can read both the upper side and the lower side. But the C64 read head was like, well, I don't know if it was up or down. It doesn't really matter. But it was on one side, and when you flipped, it was on the exact same position. But the read heads on a PC drive, the two drive heads, the read heads, they sit like not exactly on top of each other. They are, one would be more outwards and one would be more inwards. So when you try to read the flip side of one of those disks, that won't work when you read it via the flip side's read head. You need to physically alter your disk drive to be able to access track -3 or thereabout. So when one of the read heads is on track 0, the other one needs to be on track like -3, because that's where the C64's data sits when it's on the flip side of track 0. I hope that sort of made sense. You need to change the disk drive physically to be able to go to track -3. Otherwise, you cannot read the flip side of the disk. But why don't you just flip it over? That would be easy, wouldn't it? Yes and no. Then you have the little other peculiar thing about the C64. So let's see if I have it here. Let's see if you can see it. That little hole. The drive mechanism is here, but then you have this little other hole. I'm looking through that one now. So this thing, now you can see the hole, I hope, if I kind of blink it like that. On every rotation of the physical media, that little hole is visible in the media, is visible through the hole of the sleeve. And the PC disk drive relies on that. Okay, so unless you are able to read the backside like that, if you try to do that, then that flip hole flips sides as well. And if the PC disk drive now relies on a hole that should be like here where I'm pointing now, there is no hole because that suddenly is on the other side. So it's like a very logical mechanical thing that just happened. So unless you want to create that little hole also on the other side of the sleeve, then you need to modify your drive. There is, of course, the opportunity of changing the light thing here, but that's still modifying the drive, so it doesn't really matter. You can't get away without modifying your drive if you want to read the flip side of C64 5¼ disks. That was everything for this week. Now you are fully up to date on what's available for ensuring that you preserve the stuff that risks rotting away on magnetic media. Magnetic media has been tremendously good for so many years, but it's rotting away, and it's your obligation as well to contribute to ensure that nothing gets wasted and rotten away on magnetic media. So find yourself a solution that can read all the stuff from your disks and ensure that you read them. And if you don't do that, then at least identify somebody who could do it for you. There are a number of people interested in contributing to preserving the digital history, to ensuring that that is available for the future. And a number of them are doing it really well. If you have a stack of disks and you are now aware that that should be preserved, but you're not interested enough to do it, please write a comment down below, and I'm sure I will connect you with somebody willing to take on the opportunity of preserving your disks to ensure that they don't rot away. So if you haven't done already, write your name in a comment down below and you will be connected to somebody who could preserve your disks. Do it today. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next week.